Okay, hopefully you guys can see my screen now. Can you see ReadSoft online, Eric? Thank you, Ainsley. Okay, so I do have a few PowerPoints to go over, and then we will jump right into the demo. Okay, so a couple of the highlights about what we're going to be going over today. It is completely built into D365 for finance and operations. Also, AX 2012, if anybody is on an older version of the ERP. That means there's not going to be integration issues or synchronization delays, so you'll have real-time insight into your AP processes and invoices. It will not violate any standard D365 functionality that you have set up, such as your configured account structures or matching rules and tolerances. It is certified by Microsoft, so that means we have to adhere to Microsoft best practices. And there are more than 30 million invoices processed annually in XFlow across companies around the world. XFlow does have enhanced workflow, so that means your workflow or your invoice approvals can be based off traditional workflow or position hierarchies or a combination of the two. XFlow does have a dynamic approval chain, so if something in the coding is changed, the approval chain will be rerouted immediately. So for example, if you're doing approvals based off department owner and it's originally going to sales and you recode it to marketing, it will be rerouted to the correct department owner. It does leverage all standard D365 logic, and it does display the entire approval chain. So at any point in time, you can see who has approved it and who has yet to approve it. The setup of the workflow looks and feels like standard D365. It is user-friendly on all modern mobile devices. So this is referring to those invoice approvals. So what happens is once a day, XFlow will send out an email and say, here are your invoices to approve from today. It'll also include any emails or any invoices you have not approved from prior days. And there will be a link to the portal. So you can click on that link. You can launch it from your computer, your phone, your tablet, wherever you are in the world, and you'll be able to view and approve those invoices. So the solution at a high level is you're going to be getting invoices in some manner. Probably the most common is email invoices as well as paper invoices that are sent in-house. So the OCR, which we'll look at in just a second, it's going to capture that invoice image into data, and then the invoice data will be sent as an XML, and the invoice image is a PDF into XFlow and D365. It is fully integrated with the purchasing module, inventory and logistics, accounts payable, finance, project accounting, and fixed assets. So any of those other submodules that you're using within D365, XFlow can support as well. If it matches, if all the criteria matches and it's a purchasing or invoice, it can go straight through to accounts payable for payment processing. Okay, so we're going to look right at the OCR. So this is ReadSoft Online. Now, we do not force any particular OCR tool, but we do have a close relationship with ReadSoft, and we have a team that supports that. So if you want to use another OCR tool, you could, but we would just need to provide XFlow with the XML image, the XML, and the PDF image of the invoice to import into D365. A couple of things about ReadSoft. It is an automated tool. There is a template per country that determines what information is needed for that country by your business. The templates are easy to maintain, so you can have things added or removed that you need to for your business. What happens is each time an invoice comes into ReadSoft, it'll create a vendor template specific to that vendor. We'll call it a vendor fingerprint. And you do have the ability to determine if you want to capture invoice header or invoice header and invoice lines. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started on ReadSoft Online. Now, for purposes of demo today, I have broken the automation in my system. I've already passed through one of the, so we have a lot to cover in today's session. I've already passed through one invoice, but this one is going to be a purchase order invoice, and we're going to look to see how we would capture this in ReadSoft Online. Now, for demo, I have broken the automation. Generally, I should only be dealing with my exceptions in ReadSoft Online, such as a new vendor, a vendor changes their template, or a bad scan. And that is normally controlled by this box right here, allow complete documents to bypass verification. But I have this turned off. Otherwise, we would just be looking at these invoices within D365. Okay, so if I tab through, you'll see where it is picking up this information from. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this invoice number and say I had to train the OCR where to pick up invoice number from. So to do that, I'm going to come over here and click on the invoice. And the next time an invoice comes in from Acme Office Supplies, it will know to pick up the invoice number from right here. If I tab through, it'll show me where it is getting my invoice date from, my purchase order number, due date. This is one a lot of our customers choose not to capture. They want the due date to be calculated based off the vendor's invoice date and vendor terms within D365. My phone number, so this is how I am finding my vendor in this company. Most of our customers are actually now pushing their vendors from D365 into Xflow. My test field, this is just a field I added to my ReadSoft Online template. In this case, I'm just using it to capture the requisitioner initials. Okay, I have my tax amount here, my total invoice amount, my delivery cost, I don't have any, but this is related to those charge codes in D365. In ReadSoft, you can capture up to 5. Okay, my discount, I don't have one there either, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now there is a batch job within D365 that is going to run and pick up this invoice and bring it into D365. Okay, so we're going to go on into D365 now. And hopefully this batch job's run. And we'll have 2 invoices we're going to be looking at. The one is the one we just did, which is a purchase order invoice. And we'll have a second one, which I'd pushed through earlier, which is a cost invoice. For purposes of Xflow, anytime we refer to a cost invoice, it is just an invoice that does not go against a purchase order. So under Xflow, import from all. Let me do my side-by-side one. Okay, so you can see on the right side, we do have a side-by-side view that changes as we go through the invoices. Now, most of our customers actually choose to turn this side-by-side option off, but click hide side-by-side. And instead, what they'll do is they'll show invoice. And standard D365 has this open in a new window. So they'll use this to pop it open in a new window. And if they have 2 monitors, they'll put the invoice image on one monitor, the D365 screen on another monitor. And as they navigate through the invoices, the invoice that is being rendered is changing. Okay. So we will go ahead and start with our purchase order invoice. Now, PO invoices are getting the main accounts and dimensions from the purchase order itself. So also, again, for purposes of automation, I have broken it. Neither one of these invoices technically needed to stop at this step being the accounts payable processing step. But both of them have stopped today because we have, again, broken all that automation right now. So purchase order, a couple things to note is one was my PO number is here. My line type is either going to be an item or a charge, even if I'm using categories. My reference, in my environment, I am saying that whoever submitted the PO would need to approve it if there are issues. So in my environment, that's me. If there's an issue with this invoice, I will have to review the invoice. Okay. If I scroll over, I can see my matched results. So this one is matched. So this is taking into consideration all of those matching rules and tolerances I have set up in accounts payable. So I have 3-way matching in my environment. So I'm requiring this to be matched or to be a product, to have a product receipt. Now, what happens is a lot of times your vendors will email you an invoice and they'll ship the goods on the same day. And in that case, you are receiving that invoice in advance of receiving the goods. So your product receipt is not done yet. So Xflow has a parameter that will let you specify the number of days to put an invoice on hold. So for example, I'm going to say 6. So I can put that invoice on hold for 6 days. And what's going to happen is over those next 6 days, there's going to be a batch job that's going to run that's going to try to match this invoice to a posted product receipt. So if it can find a posted product receipt, it will automatically match those. and move this on to the next step, whether that is out for approval or posting. After those 6 days have expired, if it still does not have a product receipt, it will send it to, in this case, it would send it to me, but it doesn't have to send it to the PO order, but in my environment, that's how it's configured. It would send it to the PO order in order to take action on this. So whether that's submitting the product receipt or contacting the vendor. Okay. So if everything looks good here, I can go ahead and post my invoice. So I'm going to go to General and Post. Now this invoice I do expect to auto approve. So let's go see if that happened. Let's see. I think I just have a little bit of a filter problem here. Let me try that again. Okay, there we go. So it is approved. Just a little bit of a refresh issue there. If I scroll down, I will see that it was system approved by Xflow. So that means that the system evaluated based off of the rules that I have in my system. The user did not have to manually look at this invoice and approve it. So this one was system approved by Xflow. So next we will look at our cost invoice. So cost invoice, again, there's just going to be an invoice that does not go against a purchase order. So I'm going to go ahead and click edit. So if it's not going against a PO, the main accounts and dimensions cannot be derived from the PO. But yet if you look at my here, we'll see that I have cost, main accounts, and dimensions. I have 4 lines. The way this happened is Xflow has what is called a posting proposal. So if I look at this here, I say for Raven Supplies, anytime an invoice comes in, I want to take 25% of the total invoice amount to this main account and this dimension combination. The line is pretty simple. I have 4 lines at 25% each. You can have this as granular as you want, as long as at the end of the day, that fixed weight total is 100%. You can also have it go to 100% in the case of like a utility vendor, for example, where 100% would always go to the same main account and dimension combination. We could say always use this main account and these dimensions. So that's one way you can get the main accounts and dimensions on for your cost invoices. Another way is your users can go ahead and key those in. So right now I'm an accounts payable user, so I can populate that information. You'll see here I have access to my full chart of accounts. Now, some people will say, yes, AP should always be the ones entering this information. Other people will say accounts payable doesn't own the budget. The approvers and the budget owners should be the ones that are providing this information. So I'm going to leave this top line blank. And as we go into approve this invoice, we will see what that looks like if an approver is coding the main accounts and dimensions. Okay. Another way you can get your main accounts and dimensions in here is if you have the case of maybe shipping carrier or cell phone carrier where the main accounts and dimensions are static, but the amounts are changing each month. You can use an Excel template and you can import it from file and you can import in those 40 to 50 lines, whatever it is, on that invoice. You'll see here my line type is ledger by default. I could also have project if I'm using the project accounting module within D365 or fixed assets. So I would hit the fixed asset module. If everything looks good, I'm going to go ahead and post my invoice. And before we go to approve it, we're going to go look at that vendor account for Raven Supplies. So under accounts payable, we'll just go find that vendor and look at the transactions on that vendor account. Okay, and if I filter by just that invoice number, I will see that invoice is here in the vendor transactions. It is not approved. This is a standard D365 screen or field. It's normally right here. I've just pulled it over to my list page. So the invoice is not approved. So right now, if I did a payment proposal, this invoice would not be picked up for payment. but I can see it here on the vendor transactions. So if I go to Xflow, show invoice, I could show an image of the invoice, or documents. This would show me where the invoice is in the approval chain, as well as an image of the invoice. So we'll see here it's T-Ash is the current approver. If somebody had to approve it after me, their name would be listed here. So it would say T-Ash current, A Keller next. So we'll always know. Here you can see view side by side or show invoice if you want to see an image of that invoice. Okay. So now I am going to go ahead and approve this invoice. You can approve via D365. So there is an Xflow workspace under My Vendor Invoices. However, we find most of our users approve from the portal. And again, they will get an email that'll say, here are your invoices to approve. That'll have a link to the portal. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go ahead and hop into the portal and refresh that. Okay, so we'll see Raven Supplies, my invoice down at the bottom. If I click on that invoice, it'll open it up. And I'll see I have my invoice header here, my invoice lines, and my invoice image off to the right. If I'm approving on a phone or a tablet, it looks the same, with the exception that the invoice image, instead of being off to the right, is below the lines, and a user would be able to zoom in on that invoice. So from wherever they are, they can click on their phone, their links on their phone or their tablet, and be able to view these invoices and approve them. Now, we did say that I was going to key in the ledger account here. So if I use this drop down here, we'll see that I do not have the full chart of accounts like I did as an approver. So, or excuse me, as I did as accounts payable. So I can limit the main accounts dimensions by approver, what they can see. So I can make sure people are not coding. If I'm allowing them to code main accounts and dimensions, I can limit the ones that they can choose. So I'm going to go ahead and start typing here, office supplies. Same with departments. You'll see I have department 31 here, but as an approver, I cannot select that department. It is not one of mine available. So I can limit any of these. I'm going to go ahead and pick some dimensions here. Now, if I was using project accounting, I could also hit against a project. Here, I can add attachments if I need to have any supporting documentation that I want to keep with the invoice. I can add an attachment here. Or I can chat. So if I want to chat with somebody about this invoice, I can. Now, anything I chat here will maintain with this invoice. So I'll be able to see it in D365 as well as in the portal. So I'm going to go ahead and type a message to Vince. Okay. And he will get an email that says to please pay this vendor ASAP. And this chat will stay with this invoice from now on. So from here, I could approve it. I can reject my invoice, put it on hold, forward it if somebody else should forward it, validate it. That would validate the accounting rules that I have in place. If I go ahead and click approve, it will also make sure it does validate at time of approval. So if I have an invalid account structure, I would be getting an error message now. And you'll see in just 1 second, my recent should go from 21 to 22. So recent by default are the invoices that I have approved in the last 30 days. So I'll always be able to see those invoices I have approved. If I want to see an invoice that I have approved that's older than 30 days, I can search here and I'll just click add. Go ahead and add Ravens and click search. And let's see if we find an older invoice. So this one was due on 8/22/19. So if I'm looking at older invoices, I can see out here when they were paid. Well, doesn't have to be older, just in my environment, they just have to be paid. So your approvers can always go in and see if an invoice has been paid. And so here I can see this invoice was paid on 11/12/2019 via an ACH, and it was paid in full. So if it was a partial payment, there would be a remaining amount here. If it's paid in full like this one was, the remaining amount will be 0. Okay. So there's one more thing I want to show you guys in Xflow before we go on to payment factory automation, and that is accruals. So as we're getting these cost invoices in, and we have to close the month, so let's just say we're really late in closing June, we have to get June closed, but we have some invoices out there that have been submitted. They're out for approval. They have not yet been approved, so we need to accrue those costs in June. So Xflow has a job, it's a periodic job here, that will assist us with creating a journal for those accruals. So I'm going to date invoices. I want to include invoices that are dated up through 6/30, and I want my journal to be dated 6/30, and I'm going to reverse it on 7/1. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And in just a minute, Xflow will create a general journal for me. So general journal 745. So this is a standard D365 general journal. So if I come out here, I'll see my general journal 745. So I click on that. We'll see it brought in my debits or my credits, both. It brought in my description based on an Xflow parameters. I'm not using the line description, although I could have if I wanted to. I have an offset account of accrued purchases. This is coming from my Xflow parameters, and each line is marked as reversing with a reversing date. Now, if AP wasn't the one that coded the main accounts and dimensions, you'll see some blanks in here. So obviously, before I can post this journal, that information will need to be populated. So up here, I can see Xflow, show invoice, which would show me an image of the invoice, or I can click documents, which would again show me where this is in the approval chain, as well as I could see the invoice image here if I wanted to. So now, if I need to know where this $8.17 should go, I know I need to ask Tina, can she give me those main accounts for my accrual? This is an unposted journal, so you can remove any lines you don't want accrued, you can add any lines you want to accrue, and of course, if you have any approvals or workflows on the journal, that will all have to be processed before you can go ahead and post it. Okay. So next we will move on to our payment side. I'm just going to switch environments quickly. Here we go. So there's two pieces on the payment side we want to show you guys today. One is payment factory automation, and the other one is going to be AP EFT Plus. So payment factory automation, at a high level, what this is we found that most of our customers are doing a payment run, the same payment run every week, or maybe twice a week. But, of course, every week they're going in there and they are saying, you know, on every Tuesday, let's pay our ACHs that are due through Wednesday or whatever day. So this payment calendar, payment factory, what it does is it allows you to automate that, and you'll have that payment proposal journal sitting waiting for you in D365. You'll be able to add, remove, edit, make any changes you want to, and then you can go ahead and it'll prevent you from having to create that same payment journal every single week in each company. Okay, so here we go. I'm under Treasury Automation Suite. Let me just collapse all. Okay, open up my payment calendar, and I'm going to do calendar generator. For those of you that are using the payment proposal, this will all look very similar to you. So my journal name, what journal am I going to use? So in this case, it's vendor pay. You'll see here I have my payment company. So I could create this for multiple legal entities in one calendar generator. So I don't need to switch screens. If I have 10 companies I'm paying out of, I can do it all from here. Normally, most of our customers will do this for the full year. So they'll do it from, you know, 1/1 to 12/31. I am going to go ahead and start it today, and I'm going to end it on 9/30. The day of the week, this is the days of the week you pay on. So I'm going to say Tuesday. If you paid every day, you could have multiple checks out there, or just check, you know, pay Tuesday, Friday out there. Okay, so the earliest time, this is, we do have one customer that's using this, and this is for the case that they have check runs that they have to send out twice a day. So they have a payment proposal in the mornings and a payment proposal in the afternoon that they have to generate those payment proposals for the checks. Otherwise, you don't have to worry about earliest time. The description, I'm just going to say Tuesday, and the pay group. This one's optional, but in test, I always put something in here. Now, for those of you familiar with the payment proposal, these look very familiar to your date offsets, except for here, we don't have a link to a calendar. So what we do have is a to date. So let's say if I wanted to include everything up through Friday here, I would say 3. So I want 3 days in advance of the day I'm creating this. So I'm creating the payment proposal on Tuesday. I want it to include invoices that are due through Friday. My total payment date here, if I wanted it to be today, this is going to be the day that my payment posting date is. I'm going to say 0. Or if I wanted it to be tomorrow, I'm going to say 1. Okay. If you have centralized payments, you can go ahead and separate by legal entity. I'm going to click records to include and filter. And here I can filter by certain criteria. So method of payment, vendor groups, currency. Also here I have company accounts. So I say which companies am I selecting. Let's see. So I'm just having USMF here, but if I had multiple legal entities to select, I could select all with one swoop. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and then OK, and then it is going to create out here my payment calendar. So if I just filter by Tuesday, it'll bring it up. So what most people will do is they'll process the full year like this, and then any holidays. So let's see, we know 9/4 is a holiday, so we actually want to include payments that are due through the 6th. And because, you know, maybe 9/8 we're just going to be getting back, we're not going to actually make these payments until the 10th. So we can make any changes here on the run date and time and the to dates and the total payment dates. So what most people do is they'll have their company holiday calendar and they'll have the screen open and they'll make any changes. And then when they come in on Tuesday, there's a batch job that's going to run. Tuesday, an unposted payment journal will be sitting there and they can make any changes they need to. Okay. So next, we are going to look at AP EFT Plus. So in Treasury Automation Suite, just going to look at the file formats really quickly. So I'm just going to pick a file format out here. I'm going to pick an XML one. So I like the XML formats because if we look at any of the XML formats, most of them will let you pay ACHs, bank printed checks, and wires all in one format. So it's just a little bit easier. Now we do have a format library out here. So we do have multiple banks. I selected by Bank of America, but we do have hundreds of other banks out here. If you have a format or a bank that is not in our library, we do develop those formats free of charge. Okay, so under this payment specification here, I want to show you guys the field validation rules. So what we have found is sometimes people were sending out files to the bank and the bank was rejecting them because you were missing specific information that was required for that payment. So in the case of a SWIFT wire, which I'm standing on here, a SWIFT code would be required, right? So if I just find my SWIFT code here. Now, if I look here, the source field location, that is where in D365 it's looking for this information. And if I scroll over to the right, it'll say that it is required. So before I generate a file, I can run a validation, and it's going to make sure that that vendor has a SWIFT code. And if it does not, I'm not going to be able to create the file because I'm going to be missing information. So we're trying to eliminate those files we send to the bank rejects them because of something that we missed in the file or the setup. And you'll see, we should not see an error message today, but if you do, when you see an error message, it'll give you this exact string here. So you know exactly not only what is missing, but where D365 is looking for that information. Okay. The other thing I'm going to show you on the file is the inbound file group. So the file we send to the bank is an outbound file. It'll include all of our payments. Most banks can, within 15 to 20 minutes, send back a response file. We'll call it an inbound file, and it will let us know whether or not each payment was accepted or rejected. And if we can get that file back, what we'll do is we'll read that in, and we'll update the payment journal lines with approved for the accepted lines and rejected for the rejected payments. And so that's when we do a post the journal, we will not be able to post those rejected lines because they were not sent out. So those payments that were rejected will not be posted within D365, and those vendors are not going to get an email saying that they were sent an email address or sent a remittance. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and go into accounts payable, and I'm going to pay one of my vendors. Now, anytime you see this flag accepts payment request, this is checked because this is one that the system created from those payment proposals for us. But I'm just going to go in and pay one vendor. So I'm just going to go find one vendor to pay. Maybe. Looks like somebody paid my invoice out there. So I am just going to pay this vendor. Normally, that's not what we would do. We'd be paying an invoice, but my invoice has been consumed. I would recommend generally defaulting this in from either your payment proposal or your vendor payment journal. So this information would come in. So now before I go and generate my file, I'm going to validate. And so this is going to run those field validation rules we were talking about. So I'll click validate, APEFT plus. Okay, journal's okay. So that means I'm okay to process my journal. So there's two ways to do this. I'm going to talk about one and then we'll do the other. So there's to create, change APEFT state, send file later, and send file now. So if I send file now, it is going to create a payment file. And if my communications are set up to go SFTP to the bank, it'll automatically transmit that to the bank. So that means one payment journal within D365 equals one payment file out to the bank. Obviously, that's the best automation. The next one, change APEFT plus state send file later. That's the one we're going to do today. What this would do is when I click this, it's going to transfer this journal over to Treasury Automation Suite. And if any journals come in throughout the day that have this same method of payment against the same file format, it'll go ahead and consolidate those into one file. So that'll allow you, if you're breaking up your payment journals for any reason, to send one file to the bank. The other advantage of send later is if a treasurer or somebody else needs to release the files, AP can do everything up to this point, and then the Treasury Department would go in and actually release the file. Okay, so we're going to go find our file now. So I'm going to click Inquiries, snapshot and click on my file number, and we'll see there's just the one out there that I had created. If I had more that came out throughout the day, my payment journal count would increase. I'm going to select this guy and begin processing. Now, if I have my communication set up to transmit to the bank, when this says transmitted, I know that the bank has received the file. Okay. So this next piece, I'm going to go ahead and pretend like we're getting an inbound file back. I'm not actually connected to a bank. So we're just going to walk through this piece. I'm going to select this file and click begin processing. And this should be doing a few things. One, if you have it set up to post your journal, it will go ahead and post that journal for you. Two, as you'll see here, it's sending an email. And we'll see in a second if that completed. Let me go ahead and refresh this. Yep, so it did complete. If the email was not sent, we would see exactly what we do down here, which is completed email not sent. Now, under file details, we only have one vendor. It's pretty easy to tell that all emails were sent when it's completed. But if it said email not sent, it would also tell us who had that failure, and we would be able to resend the vendor email from here. Let's see if I can get this to come up. So here is the email that I just got. Now, obviously, I'm not paying an invoice because I didn't have any out there to pay, but this would send the vendors the email remittance with a SRS report. If the journal is posted, which mine, normally I would have this auto post. Somebody has turned that off, so let me go ahead and post this journal really quickly. So I'm going to post this journal. So remember we said the bank's going to send back an inbound file. They'll let us know whether they accepted or rejected the payments. On that inbound file that comes within 15 to 20 minutes, the bank is only checking the file format, the routing number, and a couple of the other things. Sometimes 2 days later, you'll still receive a rejection. And so as long as the journal is posted, you can go ahead and reverse it from here. So if I go into file details, you'll see I click reverse posted payment. And this mimics kind of that check process. If anybody's ever reversed a check in standard D365, this is kind of mimicking that same thing. So by default, my reversal date, same as standard D365, is the date it was created. So I'm just going to say 7/15, click reverse. And if I had paid an invoice, it would unsettle that invoice, open it back up, and it would reverse that posted payment. And next time I do a payment run for that vendor, that invoice would come back in. So obviously, if I have a payment run coming today, I may want to put that vendor on payment hold until I can figure out why their payment was rejected. All right, so that's all I had. I think now we can open up for questions. Eric?
Sure, yeah. Anybody that has questions, go ahead and enter them into the chat box and we'll get those answered for you.
Tina, I know one thing that folks have asked us in the past is what parts of what you demoed today is also available on AX 2012 if listeners are still on the old or on-premise solution.
Yep, so the first part that I demoed was with the Xflow, that is, and the last part, the APEFT. The part that is not is that payment factory automation, which is those automation of those payment proposals.
I'm not seeing any, oh, there is one more that has come through. How can SIS ensure a smooth implementation? We have had challenges with advanced payroll and PCM due to resource constraints at SIS. I'm gonna let our senior business development executive on the call, Chris Kalukas, answer that question.
Thanks, Eric. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so what we would do is just plan the work. So we would look at our current schedule and plan the work to make sure the resources are available.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. Nope. There is one more that's come through. Yes, this is being recorded, and we will be sending out the recording either later this afternoon or first thing in the morning. And if there are any questions that you think of after we finish out today, feel free to email us. We'd love to connect with you and get those questions answered. We want to thank everybody for taking the time to attend today's webinar. We appreciate you spending the time with us this afternoon. If you have any other questions, if you'd like to take a deeper look at what you've seen today and see how we can see how that can fit in with your business requirements, please contact Debbie Peavy, and we'll leave her email up on the screen for a moment. And keep an eye out in the future. We'll be sending out more email webinar invites as well as information about the Dynamics Communities User Group Summit coming up. Thanks, everybody, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you.